Whether you're a VR content creator, just a VR gamer, or a VR developer, the dumpster fire of Unity that has happened this week is something that you should be concerned with. That is what we're going to talk about in today's video. I want to get into a little bit of the details of basically what Unity has done, why I personally feel like that is going to severely negatively impact VR. Keep in mind, these are all 100% my opinions. So for those of you that maybe are not attached to what is going on in the game industry, essentially you have all of these different game engines that games are made on, and you have them competing for market share. And really, Unreal has been stepping up lately, where over the years, Unity has been in decline. And I think this is the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for Unity. I'd be very surprised to see how Unity digs themselves out of this hole. It's even possible for them to dig themselves out of it. So for a little bit of context, I said I'm a VR content creator. I actually own a game studio called Firebyte Studios. We actually just released our first commercial release on the 7th of September. That was made in Unity. We chose Unity as our game engine, as a lot of up-and-coming people do as well. I worked for larger game studios, such as Aim Lab, the first-person esports trainer. They are going to have some issues with this new policy, but let's go ahead and get into it. So essentially, what is Unity trying to do? Well, they had a pretty decent free license that you could develop games on the Unity game engine, and then you wouldn't have to pay a licensing fee until you reached a certain revenue goal. Essentially, they offered different tiers of licensing as well. Firebyte, and full disclosure, Firebyte paid for our Unity licensing. So we had the pro level, and really a vast majority of indie developers are not going to be affected by this directly. When this gets implemented, if it gets implemented, I do feel like they are going to eventually walk this back, but I think enough trust has been lost in the company already, but we'll get into that. So Unity essentially decided that they were going to implement a install fee, basically, and put that burden on the developer of the game. And essentially, anytime that somebody downloads the game or uses the Unity runtime, which gets installed when you install a game that Unity has made, the developer would have a fee put on them of 20 cents. There is a lot of diciness to how this can go wrong. You know, some of the more obvious ones, piracy, which Unity has said it doesn't include piracy, but they're not really fully divulging yet how this runtime is going to report installs. So you have, piracy. What if, people want to kind of hate install your game, so to say? So if somebody writes a script that just uninstalls and reinstalls your game over and over and over again, multiple times. You have people who have more than one PC. I have a desktop, I have a Steam Deck, I have a VR headset, and I have a gaming laptop. So let's say that I download a game on my Steam Deck, and then I download that same game on my PC, and then my laptop, and then maybe there's a VR version like Phasmophobia has, or Labyrinthe, or Devour, and I want to play that in VR. So then I, install it there as well. So now I'm one person who has downloaded that developer's game 4 times, at 20 cents a pop. So you can see how this can kind of snowball really, really quickly. But essentially, they're really only saying that it's only going to affect, the large developers. Battlestate Games makes the game Escape from Tarkov. It was done in Unity. They hit the 200,000 downloads and $200,000 in revenue, probably 10 to 15 times over. Blizzard Entertainment's Hearthstone was also made in Unity. They have probably done that game, 100 times over, and it's free to play. And we'll get into the implications with this model that Unity's doing with free to play games. And then we're going to get into how it affects VR. So essentially, I would say that everybody in the VR industry that develops games is independent developers. I would say that we have our own triple A's within our niche of gaming, such as like Resolution Games or Combat Waffle Studios. However, Tabor is Unreal, so they're perfectly fine with this. But 80% to almost 90%, if we look here at this Reddit post, they say more than half, this was 10 months ago, more than half of VR applications are made with Unity and only 10% are with Unreal. I don't know necessarily how true that is. Take this with a grain of salt. It is Reddit. According to the latest Unity Unite conference, they have 50% of all mobile games plus PC and 72% of all VR games and apps. I would say that's pretty accurate when you start breaking down and kind of searching around for what games are made in. So, Blade and Sorcery, Unity, Breachers was Unity. Gorilla Tag would have been Unity. Gorilla Tag is a very good example that we're going to get into of how this free-to-play model is going to fundamentally change the VR industry in a negative way if this is implemented. So we have a game like Gorilla Tag that is now paid for. So you buy it on the Oculus or the Meta store. However, take a look at how they rose to fame and built an audience. So that was pretty much done as a free-to-play game. So let's say they were on as a free-to-play game and they had, 500,000 installs of Gorilla Tag. They are now above that 200,000 threshold, and now they're paying per install of Gorilla Tag. And then, let's say that they went to the official app store. Let's say that they would have remained a free-to-play business model and they would have just used in-app purchases to fuel development of the studio. And let's say by that point they had made, $250,000 in in-app purchases in the, previous 12 months when this rule goes into effect that Unity is doing. And now they're at $250,000 and they have 1 million downloads by this point. So you start getting into, is it even cost effective to develop free to play games anymore? And that doesn't even, discuss the topic of, VR pirating. I'm not going to get into it, but it is a huge deal in the VR niche that Meta has really done nothing about. And it's very easy to do. So you get into now these indie developers are like feeling the brunt of the cost of all of this. And really, there's no way that you can do anything about it. Fortunately enough, Firebyte Studios is getting out. We're out of our development cycle for the game that we just released. So moving forward, we will be going into Unreal Engine. But overall, I think that there's just the massive outrage. It's very rare, gamers like to hate on game developers when things aren't necessarily what the gamer wants in their game. Indie devs or, game developers, occasionally you hear on Twitter and stuff that they're complaining about, gamers are entitled. But this is really one of the first issues that we've had in the gaming industry that I can remember that has pretty much united both people together, both sides of the coin, and just funneled it all to Unity, which they rightfully deserve. And it really comes down to greed, right? I've been trying to rack my brain all day thinking of potentially why Unity would be making this decision kind of as a game developer and a logical person. If this was my engine and I was the person that was the CEO of the company, why would I possibly implement this to indie developers and to the gaming industry in general? The CEO of the company itself had to have known that it was a terrible idea because he decided to sell off all of his stocks. He sold off 2,000 shares a week before Unity revealed their runtime fee. So even the CEO knows that this was a terrible decision and, let his stocks go. And, stocks reflect that today. I mean, if you look at what Unity closed with today, and my camera's in the way, so let me move myself down, they closed at a loss. And I think that this is only going to get worse. I think that we're going to see Unity take a bigger hit here. Because in a perfect world, even if this only affected the top developers that are developing games in Unity, if Unity is willing to do this to their people that are developing games that have massive audiences and massive player bases, what makes me think personally that Unity cares about the small indie developer such as myself or a lot of other people that are trying to develop games in the VR space? VR gaming is mostly pushed completely by indie developers, and I think who said it best was SideQuest's Median article about it today, which will be linked in the description below. I highly recommend that you go and check that out, where they kind of break down everything in a really easy to read format, even if you're not into game development. But I think that the ultimate issue is that you now have a bunch of low to small to medium sized development companies in the VR industry not sure what their next move is. They've lost trust. I have lost trust in Unity. I don't really want to use Unity. And personally, when I picked a game engine and I was getting into game development to begin with, the reason that I picked Unity was because I liked to see games that were made in it versus Unreal. And I went with the game engine without really knowing much about engines at the time. I went into picking Unity because I loved Hearthstone. I loved Escape from Tarkov and many, many more Unity games that are beloved by me. And I was like, oh, if all of these games came out of Unity, it must be a pretty good engine. And the same can be said for Unreal, but nobody likes this. I haven't seen anybody in any of these tweet threads or these X threads that supports this at all. So even this guy, so can we just hate install someone's game until they run out of money? Cool. Yeah, piracy is now going to bankrupt developers. Good job, Unity. Unity developers might single-handedly bring back disc games. I don't think that we're coming back to that, but Opera GX, Frog of Shame, yeah, I mean, they're jumping in on this. You've seen a lot of other big reputable people. You have Geoff, which was the Game Awards, saying what a joke. I think G-Man himself from Gmod has been very vocal about this. The memes are coming out. So really, it's an absolute dumpster fire. I think it's going to affect VR game development greatly. I think we're going to see the landscape change. I know some VR developers personally that have projects that they're wrapping up in Unity right now. But I think moving forward, we are going to see more VR games finally being developed in Unreal. And Unreal has its quirks about working in VR. There is a reason that Unity was the predominant engine in this standalone VR era. But it's a shame. And I know that they're going to walk this back. They're going to get this under control, this dumpster fire. They're going to walk it back. But without getting, too political, much like, Budweiser and a lot of the other companies that have taken massive losses this year, once you lose public trust and public authenticity, you really never come back from it. This very well might be the last nail in the coffin for Unity. I'll be interested to see what happens. I don't think I'm going to cover this type of video again. I do want to just get into playing games. I know that, the other video that I posted was a little bit different. This is super important to me as a content creator, to me as a game developer, and it should be important to all of you guys as people that play VR games. But that's going to do it for me all. Hit the subscribe button if you like this type of content, and we will see you all on the next one.